The first thing I remember is the sound. A hollow beep, 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 somewhere above my head, steady, mechanical, almost mocking me. My chest burned, and every breath felt like dragging air through broken glass. I opened my eyes, and the harsh white lights of the intensive care unit blurred into view. Tubes snaked into my arms. My lips were dry, my throat scorched from the oxygen mask. I had been pulled back from the edge of death, but I wasn't sure if it was mercy or cruelty. I wasn't afraid of pain. I wasn't even afraid of dying. What I feared most was being alone, and as the minutes stretched into hours, I waited for the faces that never came. My husband, Daniel. My 2 children. My sister, who had promised me she'd always be there. Where were they now? Surely someone had called them? Surely they knew I had collapsed, that I had been rushed into emergency care. Any normal family would have rushed to the hospital, wouldn't they? I told myself to be patient. Maybe traffic. Maybe work. Maybe something urgent was keeping them from my bedside. But as day melted into night, and the sterile smell of disinfectant clung to my every breath, no one came. Only the nurses hovered in and out, adjusting drips, checking vitals, offering polite but distant smiles. On the 3rd day, when the doctor said, "You're very lucky you survived," my eyes burned, not from the tubes, not from the weakness, but from the absence of the people I loved most. "Has anyone called for me?" I croaked, my voice barely above a whisper. The nurse hesitated. "No calls. No visitors yet, sweetheart. Maybe tomorrow." Tomorrow. That word became a cruel joke. Every tomorrow bled into another empty yesterday. And then, on the 7th day, the truth slipped out. A young nurse, barely older than my daughter, leaned over me with pity in her eyes. "You must have such a strong heart, surviving what you did. I can't believe your family still managed to go on vacation." I could never leave my mom like that. I froze. My fingers tightened weakly around the blanket. "Vacation?" I rasped. Her eyes widened, realizing she had said too much. "Oh, maybe I shouldn't." "Tell me," I demanded, my voice breaking. "They left for Hawaii the day after you were admitted." I heard them at the front desk talking about their flights. They said you'd be fine here." The world tilted. For a moment, I thought my heart monitor would betray me, spiking and screaming out the betrayal that had just carved through me. My family. The people I had sacrificed for, loved unconditionally, bled myself dry for. They had boarded a plane, smiled at strangers, sipped cocktails on a beach while I lay between life and death. Tears blurred my vision, spilling hot and unrelenting down my cheeks. My chest heaved, but no sobs came out, just silence, broken only by the rhythmic beep of the machine that refused to let me go. I had always thought the cruelest pain was physical. I was wrong. The cruelest pain was being abandoned when you needed someone most. Lying there, I understood something with terrifying clarity. I wasn't just alone in that ICU. I had been alone for years. I just hadn't wanted to see it. And now there was no denying it. The day I was finally discharged from the ICU, the world outside the hospital looked almost foreign. The sun was too bright, the laughter of strangers too careless, and the air too sharp for someone who had just brushed against death. A volunteer wheeled me to the curb, where a taxi waited. Not my husband, not my children. The ride home felt like being dragged back into a life that no longer belonged to me. My body was weak, fragile like porcelain, but my mind was sharper than it had ever been. Every bump on the road whispered the same question. How could they? When I pushed open the front door, the sound of laughter hit me first. Real, full-bodied laughter. The kind I hadn't heard from them in years. For a fleeting second, my heart leapt. Maybe they had planned a surprise welcome. Maybe they had been waiting for me all along. But then I saw it. Suitcases half unpacked in the hallway. Beach towels tossed carelessly over the banister. A lee of fake flowers drooping off the back of a chair. And in the living room, my family sat with golden tans, sipping iced drinks as they flipped through photo albums. My husband looked up startled. "Oh, you're home already?" Already? As if I had come back early from a shopping trip, not from the edge of death. My daughter giggled, scrolling through her phone. "Mom,
You should have seen the beaches.
the water was so blue. We swam with dolphins. It was magical." My son chimed in, holding up his phone. "And the food. Look at this lobster, Mom."
I swear it was bigger than my head.
I stood frozen in the doorway, gripping my walking stick to keep from collapsing. The anger boiled under my skin, but all I could do was whisper. I was in intensive care. Daniel waved a dismissive hand. "We knew you were being taken care of. The doctors said you'd pull through. You worry too much. We needed a break. Honestly, it was good for the kids." I stared at him, words clawing at my throat, but none came out. How could I explain that while I was fighting to breathe, I had pictured their faces for strength, only to discover those same faces were smiling under a tropical sun? My sister, who had promised she would always be there, breezed in from the kitchen with a tan line across her shoulders. She hugged me lightly, the scent of coconut oil clinging to her. "Don't look so upset, Elena. You're alive, and that's what matters. We deserved a little happiness, too." Deserved. That word cut deeper than any scalpel. As if my suffering had been a nuisance, as if my life had been an inconvenience they needed to escape. I excused myself quietly, retreating to my bedroom. My legs shook with each step, not from weakness, but from the weight of betrayal. I shut the door, leaned against it, and let the tears come, silent, endless rivers that soaked my hospital gown. They would never know that in that moment. Something inside me broke forever. The part of me that forgave, the part of me that excused, the part of me that believed love was unconditional. I stared at myself in the mirror, pale, fragile, eyes sunken from illness, and I whispered, "Never again." They thought I was still weak, still dependent. But beneath the cracks, something else was forming. A harder shell, a sharper edge. They had left me for dead. And one day soon, they would regret ever coming back. The days after their return felt like living among strangers. My family's laughter drifted through the house, but to me, it sounded hollow, like a cruel echo of what love should have been. They believed I was fragile, broken, still teetering on the edge of weakness. And I let them believe it. I played my role well. I shuffled slowly around the house, clutching my walking stick, breathing heavily as though every step drained me. When Daniel sighed and muttered, "You should rest, Elena. You can't handle much," I lowered my head and nodded. When my daughter rolled her eyes and said, "We'll handle the groceries, Mom. Just stay out of the way," I forced a smile. What they didn't know was that every night, behind the locked door of my room, I was rebuilding myself. At first, it was physical. Tiny movements, squeezing a ball in my hand, stretching my legs, forcing air deep into my lungs. I pushed through the pain, sweat soaking the sheets as I trained my body to obey me again. Each victory was mine alone, walking from one wall to the other without support, climbing a staircase in the dead of night, standing tall in front of the mirror. Then came the mind. During the endless hours of isolation, I began reading books on business, investments, resilience, psychology. Knowledge became my weapon. I discovered that my late father had left a small inheritance locked away in an account my family never bothered to claim. I filed the papers quietly, retrieving what was rightfully mine, and began investing it with careful precision. While they wasted money on luxury dinners and frivolous shopping, I built the foundation of independence brick by brick. I opened a modest online business under a different name, something small at first. But it grew. Orders trickled in, then poured. And with every dollar I earned, I felt chains loosening around me. I also began reconnecting with people I had long neglected. Old friends who had once adored my laughter but drifted away when my family consumed all of me. Some welcomed me back warmly, others cautiously. But one thing was clear, there were people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could provide. One evening, when I was sure everyone was asleep, I stood at the window watching the moonlight bathe the street in silver. My reflection stared back at me from the glass, no longer pale and broken, but sharper, stronger. They thought I was still their victim, But I was becoming something else entirely. One night, my son left his phone on the table, unlocked. I glanced at the screen and saw photos from Hawaii. Daniel with his arm around a woman I didn't recognize, smiling in a way he hadn't smiled at me in years. My stomach clenched, but not from pain. This time, it was from clarity. Their betrayal ran deeper than just abandonment. They had left me to die, and they had replaced me before my body was even cold. The rage that surged through me could have consumed me, but I tamed it. I held it close, feeding on it, letting it sharpen my focus. Revenge wasn't about screaming or fighting. It was about patience. About striking so precisely that the wound never healed. And so I smiled at them during dinners, laughed weakly at their jokes, played the obedient, fragile wife and mother. All the while, I was laying the groundwork for a day they would never see coming. They believed I owed them my gratitude for taking care of things while I recovered. But in truth, I owed them nothing. Soon, they would learn that the woman they abandoned in a hospital bed was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, colder, someone who knew exactly how to make them pay. The day of reckoning came disguised as an ordinary family gathering. Daniel insisted we host a dinner for some close relatives and friends, to show everyone we're doing well. He said with that smug tone I had learned to despise. My children chimed in eagerly, already planning the menu, the music, the photographs they would share from Hawaii. I agreed, my smile polite, my heart silent. Inside, though, my plan had already been set in motion. That evening, the house buzzed with chatter and clinking glasses. Relatives complimented my children's tans, laughed at Daniel's stories, and admired the photos being passed around.
What a beautiful vacation!
One aunt exclaimed.
You all look so happy!
I stood at the edge of the room, my wine untouched, watching the scene unfold. They were so sure of themselves, so certain that their betrayal had been buried in silence. When the laughter reached its peak, I cleared my throat. Everyone, I began softly. I'd like to say a few words. The room quieted. Dozens of eyes turned toward me. My family smiled nervously, clearly unprepared. You've all admired the photos, I said, my voice steady, but there's something those pictures don't show. While these smiles were captured on sandy beaches in Hawaii, I paused, letting the silence grow heavy. I was lying in intensive care, alone, tubes in my arms, machines keeping me alive. A ripple of shock swept across the room. Murmurs rose like a tide. I saw Daniel stiffen, his smile cracking. They left me there. I continued, my voice stronger now. My husband, my children, my sister. Not one of them sat by my side. Not one of them held my hand when the doctors said I might not survive. They boarded a plane and flew off to paradise, while I fought for my life. A gasp echoed. My sister stammered, Elena, that's not fair. Not fair. I cut her off, my gaze like steel. What's unfair is giving your whole life to people who can't spare a single day to care if you live or die. Daniel reached for my arm, muttering through clenched teeth, Enough, Elena. I pulled away. No, Daniel, enough of your lies, enough of your excuses. Do you want them to see the rest? I reached into my bag and pulled out printed photos, screenshots from my son's phone. There was Daniel, smiling on a Hawaiian beach with a woman pressed against him, his hand far too familiar on her waist. Gasps turned into whispers, then into sharp stares directed at him. His face drained of color. Elena. I raised my hand, silencing him. For years, I believed I was loved. I sacrificed, I cared, I gave everything I had. And when I needed you most, you abandoned me. You betrayed me. Tonight, everyone will know the truth. The room fell into stunned silence. Relatives shifted uncomfortably, avoiding Daniel's eyes. My children looked down, shame painting their faces. I set the photos on the table, one by one, like cards in a cruel game. I will no longer be your caretaker. I will no longer be your shield. From this day forward, you mean nothing to me. Then I straightened my shoulders, every ounce of weakness gone. You left me to die. But I lived. And now I leave you to drown in the mess you've made. Without another word, I walked out, My heels clicked against the floor, each step echoing like a final verdict. Behind me, the murmurs swelled into chaos. Accusations, excuses, shame. But I didn't look back. For the first time in years, I felt free. They had stolen my trust, my love, my loyalty. But they could never steal my strength. And as I stepped into the cool night air, I knew this truth. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't destroying them. It's becoming untouchable.